What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode. Tonight, I am working on my son's 2009 Mini Cooper Clubman. I'm going to be replacing the thermostat housing. So the thermostat housing is located down in here. You can see where the upper radiator hose is right here. You can see the temperature sensor right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this part of the air box. See if I can get it to it by just removing the air box. Probably going to get to that radiator hose and pull it up so I don't leak too much antifreeze down on the ground, and go from there. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tack that air box off to the side. It's got a 10mm bolt hole in right next to the top of the head, to the right of the valve cover gasket. It's this bolt right here. Getting that bolt off. So that loosens up this air box right here, and you can just pull it out. Alright, so that air box is out of the way. You can see right here. And this hose you see right here, this guy, that mounts up to the front of the radiator core support. So we can disconnect that and get it out of the way also. Alright, so these little tabs you see here, these can be pushed out through the grill in the front. So you can see this here. Little hole there, you can just use a screwdriver to push this piece out, and it comes right out. Alright, so those two parts are off. So what we have is the two cam sensors. This is a dual overhead cam engine. It's got two cam sensors. I'm going to disconnect those. One, two. And the reason why I'm disconnecting those is because I'm going to pull up on this harness here. This just sits in a channel. See that? Just sits in a channel, and I want to disconnect everything I can to get out of the way. And this guy too can get out of the way. All right. This is your coil pack harness going into underneath this valve cover, coil pack cover that sits on the valve cover. I'm going to see if I take this cover off to loosen this up so I can raise it up a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and take off this coil pack cover that sits on the valve cover. Got two torque bits on it. Out of the way. And this, once you get this torque bits out, you got to push these little clips up. All right, that's out of the way. So now I got all these little retainers that hold the harness in. You can see here, there's one. Pull these all off to give you extra room to move that clip out of the way. That should be pretty good. She's pretty loose right now. So you got the two, you got a fan switch and the thermostat switch right here, the temperature sensor and the heat switch. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these guys off to get them out of the way. I've actually replaced this temperature sensor once before, but that did not solve the problem. So now this temperature sensor is easy to replace. Just has this little U-clip that holds it in place. And the new thermostat actually comes with a temperature sensor on it. Those are all unplugged. Alright, so what I did is I removed this little harness cover off to kind of make myself a little more slack. So when I move this thing around like this to get the entire housing off. So next time I'm going to try to see if I can get these hoses off. Try to see if I can get these hoses off because I don't see any other way get to it. Let me see if I can keep this up pinned like that. There we go. That's pinned out of the way. This one harness can just sit up here like this. Alright. So now I can see all the hoses. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling hoses off. Hopefully not get too much antifreeze on the floor. Let me grab my antifreeze bucket. Alright, so I'm starting with this guy right here. I've already loosened it up. Try to see if I can get it out without making too much of a mess. Obviously there's going to be some antifreeze. Let me see if I can get most of it in the bucket or raise the hose up out of the way. Yep, there's some right there. Sweet. Whatever's pouring out is going right down on top of the transmission and then onto the bucket. So I'm going to keep moving the rest of these out of the way. Snake these hoses up out of the way. Okay, keep you up here. Alright, so I just got two little hoses in the back, one upper, one lower. That's for the heat hoses, for the heater core. So for these two back ones for the heater hoses that go back to the heater core, probably use a small screwdriver, or if you want to use a socket, whatever's easier for you. All right. I think the bolts for the thermostat are 10 millimeter, but I'm gonna go ahead and grab a new one. So far, what we're looking at is I've removed this hose, unplugged this sensor, loosened up this hose and this hose. This guy back here, I gotta see how I'm gonna get that one off. So I'm gonna put this one back up here for now. All right, so that back one is just a massive U-clip. You pop the U-clip out with a screwdriver or a long needle nose and should come out. So I'll go ahead and pull these two front back hoses off. Good one. All right, that one had some antifreeze in there. So now I just removed the two upper and lower heater hoses. This guy back here has like a U-clip going on it. I'm going to pop that and then I'm going to start taking these bolts off. So it looks like we have two up top, a total of 3 bolts right there. So I'm going to get those guys and then I'm going to take that U-clip off. The U-clip was very easy to sneak a screwdriver in the back and just pull up on it. So I'm going to get those 3 bolts off. They are 10s, as we said earlier. I'm just going to use a shorter extension. Flashlight go. Let's see if we can get to this bottom one first. Seems like the most difficult one to get to. Alright, that one's cracked loose. This one. So I just did right here. That first one I got was the one that goes between the 2 heater hoses. This guy right here. Now I'm going to come for this guy right here. So I'm going to see if I can get in there with this 10mm shallow and swivel socket and a short extension. Yeah. So what I just realized right now when I was going after this bolt right here is that this hose right here is still connected, and this has been held on with one of those spring clamps. So I'm going to take that off real quick. These little spring clamps I hate. Let's see if we can make some room here to get to it. All right. That's moved out of the way. Oh, that's more hands-free. That hose moved out of the way. Don't even need the swivel now. Alright. I was able to get to it without any extension on it. But now that I've cracked it loose, I'll go ahead and use the extension with a grip on it to pull it all the way out. Yep. The shift linkage was in the way for me to use the longer extension, but I got it out. And there's two. And then the last one should be right at the top, near the temperature sensor, to the right of the temperature sensor. Right here, this guy. Yep, right there, simple. Hopefully there's not too much antifreeze in the block so I can catch most of it in the drain pan. This should be the last thing holding this guy in, besides the pressure of the O-ring, or the O-ring style gasket. Alright, all three bolts are off. Let's see if we can pull this guy off. Get this thing out of the way. Stay there. Out of the way. 1, 2, and 3. Alright, so she's still being hung up by that clip in the back. Pull that clip out without dropping it. Got it. Clip's right here. That's that clip I was talking about in the back. Let's see if we can get this guy in now. There it is. She's out. There's the old one. Alright, now that we're all cleaned up, the old one's out. I'm gonna go ahead and clean the area and install the new one. Alright, so I got the new one ready to go in. Gasket's sitting there good. I'm gonna go ahead and slide the new one in, and then got to be careful with sliding this guy in the back, and then I'll put that U clip back in that holds this guy in place. Let's see if I can get this in there. Alright. Stuck underneath this linkage crap. Alright. All right, so I've gone ahead and mounted up the new one, put the 3 bolts back in. And what I'm working on right now is getting this U-clip that I pulled out earlier in the back, and I'm having a tough time with it by getting my hands in there. So what I'm trying to do right now is with these small needle nose pliers is to get this in there and stick it in that channel. Because the way it works is it sits here like that. So this gets pushed in, it's got this little rubber O-ring right here, and then this holds it in place. Let me see if I can get in there and show you what I'm talking about, the O-ring. So I was able to get it in with the needle nose pliers and using my hand to get it back in there. You can see it right there. You see that little clip. So that clip back there. See if I can get to it like this just a second. That guy right there. Let's see if I turn on the flash for you. There you go. That metal ring. So that little metal ring. Let's see if I can get that in there. Yeah, so this guy right here. See that? So that gets pushed in this little channel that's there, and that holds that in place. So now that I've got that in place, I'm going to start hooking up all these hoses and sensors. So the first one I want to get to is our friend with that spring clip in the front. So fortunately, putting it back on is not that bad. I might actually swap this guy out for a screw-in kind. Let me see if I can do that. Get this guy off. Let me get a normal screw-on clamp. I hate these clamps. Whoever invented them is a jackass. All right, so I got the screw-on kind clamp right here. You heard my feelings earlier about the squeeze-on ones. Everybody has their preference, but me personally, I hate those. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this guy on with a. I already tightened up the 3 10mm bolts of the actual housing of the thermostat. So now it's just these hoses. So I'm gonna get them in place so I can get to them. Tighten them all up. Don't want to over tighten any of these because it's a plastic housing. Right. Soaking up some of this antifreeze that I spilled with this paper. Put these other hoses back on. This guy still has some antifreeze stuck in it for sure. Let's see if I can move this out of the way. And then this guy goes here. Alright. Just like that. There's 2 front hoses on. Okay. These 2 back heater hoses. You want to make sure you put these hoses back exactly where they came off of. You don't want to mess around with that and end up with bigger problems. So this thermostat housing has a total of 5 hoses going into it. 5. That's a lot. Okay, I got all 5 hoses on. Lower sensor down here. I gotta make sure I put this back properly. So it's got a little channel down here. This snaps into it like that. These guys just clip in like this. This guy can get clipped back in down here since we're all done with you. cam sensors, vacuum hoses, this guy, just like that. Make sure that it snaps back into place properly. So it's pretty easy for matching up sensors. The bottom one is black. The oil pressure sensor is gray, so you have a gray plug here. And then the temperature sensor on top of the thermostat housing is green. So they all match up, color matching, just like that. Clips right in. And this last guy. Just like that. Put this harness clip back on. Sits in here like that. This just goes back there, like that. This cover just sits over the top of everything like that. This guy, where do you go? You go on top. Just like this. Let's see if we can get you on for one time. There it goes. Stay. There it goes. All right. So what else did I pull off here? Obviously I pulled off the air cleaner in the back earlier off camera to get to the clip that I dropped, but it actually made it easier for me to clip in that little back connection of the thermostat housing that I showed earlier with that little U-clip. So now I'm just putting everything back together. I had pulled, to get some space in here, I also pulled these harnesses up. You can see the clip here. It's an O2 sensor that sits down in here. O2 sensor harness. So I'm just going to clip that back in right now. And I'm going to put the air box back in. So the air box was pretty simple. Just has two grommets on the bottom, one there. I'll just push it back into place, put the air hose back in, and then it's got a 10mm bolt right here. One, two, push, the air hose back in, like that. Set this 10mm back in place. Come on, baby. Like that. That's in place. Oops, wrong side. Okay. Where's that little screwdriver at? Right here. Put the mass airflow sensor harness plug back in. Make sure this guy is tightened up. Alright, that's back in. This is all, that's it snuck behind here like that. So we'll go ahead and put this guy back in. Make sure the harness is hidden behind it. Put those two guys back in. Up with those star bits, 12 bits. Done. Like that. And I get the extra air box in. This just pops in the bottom of the air box. Like so. Snaps in like that. That's in. It's this guy in here. Okay. I'm gonna leave that guy loose because we have to put the hose back on also. put it on properly. Oh, forgot about this guy. This guy just down here. Like that. All right. Sneak you in. Like so. Okay. Now. Come on. Okay. Okay, so the only thing left to do now is to top off the system and then bleed it. Now to bleed the system, there's a little bleeder screw on the top of the thermostat. I'll show you right here on this old one. So right next to the temperature sensor, there's a screw right here that you just crack loose and it lets the air out. So there's a little access for it down in here. All right, so I've topped off the system with the antifreeze. I just cleared all the check lights for the thermostat and the engine coolant sensor. I'm just going to be checking for any leaks. Also, right now the temperature is cool, obviously, because it's a cold engine. But I'm going to let it run, get up to temperature, and check for any leaks. I get a little bit of smoke off the engine, but I did leak a lot of antifreeze off the engine. I'm going to look underneath to see if we got any leaks coming down. There's no leaks. It's just from the antifreeze that's spilled. I'll let that all steam off, get up to temperature. Let the system breathe. You can actually access that bleeder screw right through the top here. There's a little port here. You just stick the screwdriver right down in there and get it. So I'm going to open that up right now. Alright, so we're about 190 degrees right now. I'm going to go see if any air is in the system. I'm going to show you how I bleed that out. So I'm going to go ahead and see if you can see that screw down in there. Where are you at? Right down there, that black screw. I'm going to see if I can loosen that up and see if anything comes out. Got to close it back up, check the temperature real quick. So it was at 190 earlier. Let me go check real quick what it's at. So you can see now we're at 213, which is pretty high. I want that temperature to go back down. That's what I wanted to see, is I wanted to see that level of antifreeze get sucked up into the engine, because I did let a lot leak out and I only put a little bit back in to top it off. You want that hot antifreeze to flow into the heater box to bring heat into the car. So So let's see if I'm getting heat in the car now. I'll check the temperature out. So the temperature is around 215 right now. Let's see if we got heat. And it's still coming out kind of cool. And that temperature should be a lot hotter. So I'm gonna let the heat crank and keep bleeding it. Alright, I finished bleeding out the system. I'm gonna top up the antifreeze, but I gotta run up to the parts store and get some blue antifreeze for this car. But we're done. After I top up the antifreeze, of course, off camera. If you have any questions, hit me up.